Hi everyone, I'm Corinne Wilkerson. I'm the Land Stewardship Coordinator at the Kensington Conservancy, and I'd like to welcome you and thank you for joining our webinar tonight. And just so you know that we usually do record our webinars, and then they're later available on our YouTube channel. So in case you maybe drop off early, you can watch it again, or if you know someone that wanted to join and missed it, they can see it on our YouTube channel. So just if you're not familiar with the Kensington Conservancy, we are a land trust that works to protect lands and waters in the St. Joseph Channel by purchasing property, accepting donations of land, and creating voluntary conservation easements with landowners. So we were established in 2006, and we currently protect over 1,200 acres of land across 12 nature preserves and 2 conservation easements. So before we begin the webinar, I do want to acknowledge that we are in the Robinson Huron Treaty Territory, and that the land on which we are gathered is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, specifically the Garden River, Batchewana, and Thessalon First Nations, as well as the Métis people. So with that, I'm pleased to introduce Matthew here, who will be presenting tonight's webinar on tree identification. So if you didn't read his bio on the event listing, I'll just briefly go over it. Matthew is a third-year student pursuing a Bachelor of Science degree in Environmental Science at Western University. And he's previously worked as a conservation technician with the Thames Talbot Land Trust based in London, Ontario. He's an active volunteer with Ontario Nature and is director at large with Nature London, and is also involved with several nature clubs at his university. He's also a student environmental writer for both the Thames Talbot Land Trust and the Lake Superior Watershed Conservancy. And Matthew has been in contact with me and has expressed a deep interest in the Kensington Conservancy's work, and he's offered to volunteer in several capacities. So one of them is to present a webinar. So we're very happy to have him here tonight. So without further ado, I'll pass things over to Matthew, and he will get his presentation set up to show you.
So thank you, Corinne. I'm very appreciative of everyone here today. Very excited to present this webinar on tree ID. I've been identifying trees since I was in 8th grade, and over time I've been getting more skilled at my identification. As far as identifying trees by bark and by bud. So you start small and you eventually become more skilled over time, just as time goes by. So I'll set up my presentation right now. I'm gonna share my screen. All right. Yeah. So here is my presentation. I hope you guys all enjoy it. The Kensington Conservancy does great work across the St. Joseph's Channel and on St. Joseph's Island, and I'm very appreciative of the conservation efforts. Just want to say that before I start. So, Tree ID webinar. So, this is a red oak tree right here, and it is one of the most common trees in the Great Lakes region. It's a very strong and hardy tree. So, as Corinne said, and I'll just reiterate, I'm a 20-year-old naturalist studying at Western University. I've been involved with multiple nonprofits, including Kensington Conservancy, Lake Superior, Thames Talbot Land Trust, Long Point, Ontario Nature, and most recently, the Kuchinchin Conservancy. So, here's some bonus questions just right to start off right off the bat. So, I'm standing in the photo behind a tree. Does anyone know what this tree is? You can write in the chat, and I'll give you 30 seconds. Let's see. All right. For people that don't know the tree, that tree is a red oak, which I introduced on the title slide. And what is the largest island in the Great Lakes? The largest island in the Great Lakes is Manitoulin Island. So part one, seeing the forest beyond the trees. So first we're going to dive into forest regions. Biogeography, the study of geographical distributions of living organisms, is very complex, and regions may be interpreted differently based on different authors. Boundaries are not always the same and usually differ between jurisdictions. So in the United States, you'll hear terms such as the oak hickory forest type or the beech maple forest type, while in Canada, you'll hear terms such as the St. Lawrence Great Lakes forest type and the Carolinian zone. Actually, those terms, the Carolinian zone and the Eastern hardwood forest type are the same. So even though names may be different between different jurisdictions, we'll see the same names have the same meaning. So my interpretation of the forest types in the Great Lakes is the Northern Great Lakes forest type, which is the coldest and the northernmost, and it's also the most species poor. It'll have mainly boiled coniferous trees and just the most cold tolerant eastern hardwood, such as sugar maple and yellow birch. The Central Great Lakes forest type is similar, but it includes several more southerly species, such as white oak and butternut. The southernmost zone is called the Carolinian zone, and the Carolinian zone is home to a multitude of species, many of them with very weird sounding names, such as tulip tree, sassafras, black gum, magnolia, and hackberry. So here's a map of the tree diversity in Eastern North America. As you can see, even our most northernmost forest types around Lake Superior are relatively diverse compared to other forest types, especially around here in the Western North America near British Columbia. I'm just going to see if the Zoom is, if I can pull this Zoom thing up. All right. So there are several regions that are bound to contention when you're dividing the Great Lakes into forest zones. These are the Adirondacks, the Ottawa Valley, and the Northern Michigan. So the Adirondacks, I consider part of the northern forest type due to its cold microclimate created by the mountains. Whereas the Ottawa Valley, I consider the central forest type due to its fertile soil, which supports more southerly species, including oaks and hickories. Factors that determine species richness and define forest regions. So there are three main factors. These are climate, tree species distribution limits, and landforms. So first, the climate. Tree species richness in the Great Lakes will generally increase with warmer temperatures as one travels southward. The frigid temperatures in the northern Great Lakes, such as in Kensington, preclude the establishment of many southerly species, such as hickories and tulip tree. Number two, tree species distribution limits. So tree species distribution limits are largely determined by climate. And lastly, landforms. Landforms can influence both climate and tree species distributions. For example, hickories, a major component of southern forest types, are typically only found south of the Canadian Shield, and the Canadian Shield is colder than the surrounding regions. So you'll see very different vegetation communities north of the Shield when compared to south of the Shield. This is a key of comparing forest regions, so Northern Great Lakes Forest, Central Great Lakes Forest, and Southern Great Lakes Forest to different ecological communities. I'm not going to go into this in detail because there's just so much information, but if you want to look at it after my presentation, go ahead. So now we're going to look into forest types. So the first type of forest type I'm going to go to is mesic forest types. Mesic forest types are areas that are not wet but not dry. They have a moderate amount of moisture. Most of these are dominated by sugar maple, which is extremely competitive on most sites and will dominate 50, 60, 70% of the forest overstory. So in the Northern Great Lakes, we'll see only a limited diversity of trees in these mesic forests. The northernmost areas will be strands of sugar maple and yellow birch, as in out King Mountain on the Algoma Highlands Conservancy property. That's another conservancy that helps protect land around Lake Superior and Lake Huron. Some areas will be completely dominated by sugar maple, especially areas that are suffering from beech bark disease and have subsequently seeing all the big beech trees eliminated. And other areas will see mixed sugar maple American beech strands, such as areas on Manitoulin and near Whitefish Falls. Actually, one of my favorite forests to walk in is the Kitchewa Sequendung Reserve, also called Heaven's Gate, owned by Escarpment Biosphere Conservancy, and it shows a beautiful example of a sugar maple beech mesic forest, which contrasts well with the hemlock forest and the pine forests on the La Cloche Mountains. Here are just some more slides. As you can see, this forest type is very common, and I got a lot of examples that I photographed over my time hiking across various areas in the Great Lakes. The Central Great Lakes forests. So here in the Central Great Lakes, you'll see maple beech forest, but you'll have a little bit more diversity. Species like ash, black cherry, and basswood will be more abundant and will be present in most strands. Kinghurst Forest in Grey County, Alenda Provincial Park, and Lions Head Provincial Park on the Saugeen Bruce Peninsula are three spectacular examples that I always enjoy walking and observing the various tree species. In the Southern Great Lakes, we have a much higher diversity. Although we'll get pure strands of sugar maple and beech in some places, more often you'll see this forest type is mixed in with other tree species. In many areas, tulip tree and sassafras become major components of the canopy. A tree that often accompanies sugar maple, beech, and other mesic forests is hemlock. Hemlock is extremely well adapted to heavy snowfall conditions and moist climates that are preferred by other mesophytes, moisture plants that love moist conditions. So you'll see scattered hemlock mixed in with the hardwoods in many areas. But also, hemlock can form pure strands. This is more common, especially in old growth forests and north-facing river slopes, which have a cool microclimate, ideal for hemlock. Next, we'll go through the dry forest types. Oak pine forests are your typical dry forest type in the Great Lakes region. Other species present include red maple and black cherry. I call them dry forests, but they actually have the same precipitation as moist forests. But these dry forests are just more well drained, so the soil tends to dry out more and you get more species that are typical of drier areas. In some areas, you'll get pines forming pure strands. The left picture shows the La Cloche Mountains in Killarney Provincial Park. There you'll have pine forests stretching for miles and miles on end until you reach areas with more fertile soil that are more conducive to sugar maple. These are some of the most picturesque forests, and usually they have only a scarce understory. So white pine forests are the favorites of birders when they are birding and when they're taking nature photography. Dry mesic forests are another subtype of dry forests, but they occur when the conditions are a little bit moister than normal dry forests. Here, you'll typically have red maple, red oak, and pine dominating the landscape with an understory of mixed species that love dry regions and moist regions. Oak woodland savannas are the last dry forest type I'm going into, and they're a very unique forest type found on the most well-drained forests the well-drained soils in the Great Lakes. Oak savannas have trees with a very distinctive growth form. You'll see wide limbs and a wide crown and some big limbs. It's not your typical straight and narrow tree that grows in like a closed canopy forest, such as a sugar maple forest. Now I'll go through wetland forests and other forest types. Deciduous swamps are your typical wetland forests of the Great Lakes. You'll see silver maples and ash trees dominate most deciduous swamps. Typically, these areas have standing water for most of the year, except for August and September and October. Wet mesophytic forests are among the most biodiverse in Canada. Mostly found in the southern Great Lakes region, you'll get trees with names like swamp white oak and sassafras mixed upon your various oaks and maples. There are several endangered species that specialize in breeding in this habitat, such as cerulean warblers and hooded warblers and Acadian flycatchers. Bottomland riparian forests are another very biodiverse forest. You'll see typically a species called black maple dominates riparian forests. Black maples are an extremely similar species to sugar maple, except the leaf morphology is slightly different. There's 3 lobes instead of 5, and they're slightly droopy. Wetter sites feature more walnut and hackberry than typical. And they also include a lot of ash, especially in the northern Great Lakes near Kensington. Coniferous bogs are very abundant, especially in northern regions. They grow on sphagnum moss, and in coniferous bogs, you'll have tamarack and black spruce as your typical dominants. Fun fact about coniferous bogs is you'll have a lot of carnivorous plant species such as pitcher plants and sundews. White cedar forests occur in wetlands and bogs that are more nutrient rich than your black spruce and tamarack sphagnum bog. White cedar itself is extremely adaptable, growing on wetlands as well as dry limestone cliffs along the Niagara Escarpment. Some of Ontario's oldest trees can be found on the Niagara Escarpment, and they're all white cedar or thuja, as that's another name for it. The dry mesic hemiboreal coniferous forest is a forest that's very similar to a boreal forest, but will include several species typical of the Great Lakes, namely white pine and red pine. White pine and red pine don't occur in the high boreal forest region, like out on the James Bay coast and in the Northwest Territories, so they're technically Great Lakes forest trees rather than boreal trees. When an area is slightly more moist, you'll see spruces and firs dominate more than pines. And you'll get also poplars and birches. And actually, Kensington Conservancy's nature preserves along the North Channel are a lot of coniferous hemiboreal forests dominated by spruce and pine and poplar. The most unique forest type of them all in the Great Lakes is actually Canada's southernmost, found on Pelee Island and Pelee Peninsula in Lake Erie. You'll have a very odd species association here. The dominant species is hackberry, but there's also black walnut, blue ash, chinkpin oak, shagbark hickory, and a lot of southern species from a wide variety of niches, which is very odd. I visit Pelee Island every May for the birding, and I would highly recommend a visit to Pelee Island and Pelee National Park at least once in your lifetime. It's spectacular there, especially for birders. So I'm gonna go into the part 2 of my presentation. This is helpful tree tips. So first, we're going to differentiate between tree types. So broadleaf trees are fruit-bearing trees with leafy broadleaf foliage. In Ontario, these trees are all deciduous, which means they drop the leaves in the fall. Coniferous trees, often known as softwoods or gymnosperms, are cone-bearing trees with needle-like or scale-like foliage. Now we'll talk about tendencies. Evergreen trees describe trees that retain their foliage throughout the entire year, including the winter period. This includes all coniferous trees with the exception of tamarack, which is deciduous. If you would go walking in the woods and you see a tamarack, it'll be completely bare, like all the hardwood trees, even though it's a coniferous softwood. The other tendency is deciduous, which describes trees that annually shed their foliage in the autumn season. In Ontario, this is hardwoods and tamarack, as I just have described. So now we're going to get into coniferous leaf morphology. Needle-like leaves are long, thin structures resembling a needle. Texture is highly variable, ranging from delicate, as in larches, to prickly, as in spruces. These are all trees of the pine family, or Pinaceae, pines, spruces, larches, and firs. Scale-like leaves. A tiny flat leaf resembling a scale. A cluster of scale-like leaves will appear highly branched. In Ontario, only the fuchsias, or white cedars, and junipers, or red cedars, have scale-like leaves. Now, to divide needle-like trees with needle-like leaves, we gotta look at the needles more closely. Some trees have singular needles, which means each needle is directly attached to the branch, like as in here. It's directly attached. Whereas in clustered needles, multiple needles will form a bundle, which will attach to the branch. This often occurs in pines and larches. So we're going to leaf arrangement of hardwoods now. So trees with opposite leaves have the leaf nodes opposite to each other, as in right here. So this maple leaf and this maple leaf in this diagram, they're opposite of each other. That's when I refer to opposite. The only trees with opposite leaves are maples, ashes, and buckeyes. Alternate leaves are leaves that are borne along the stem. Most hardwood trees have an alternative leaf arrangement, not including the exceptions above. Now we'll get into leaf morphology more closely. Simple leaves are when leaves are attached to a twig, as in these beech trees. There's just one individual leaf attached to the twig. Whereas in compound leaves, you have one leaf that consists of multiple leaflet structures. So these smallest structures, all of these structures in this ash right here are actually just one leaf. Okay. These include ashes, hickories, walnuts, mountain ashes, and other more rare southern species. To get into more detail, you have palmately lobe leaves, which are like maple leaves. And palmately lobed are these when they have lobes like this. And the lobes are kind of arranged like the palm of a hand, and they all come from a central point. Pinnately lobe leaves are kind of the opposite. So leaves are divided into lobes along each side of the central stalk. So each lobe in these white oak leaves are on opposite sides of the central stalk, but they do not come together in the central point, unlike palmately lobe leaves. Midden-shaped or trident-shaped leaves are distinctively shaped like a midden or trident. Sassafras is the only tree species that is like this. So now again to unlobed leaves. Elliptical leaves are when a leaf is broadest towards the middle and tapers towards the edges. Many species are elliptical, have elliptical leaves. Ovate leaves are when a leaf is broadest towards the base and tapers towards the tip. Hackberry and a few other species have ovate leaves. Obovate is the opposite of ovate. Obovate is when a leaf is broadest towards the tip and narrower at the base. Hickories and some oaks have obovate leaves. Plant-shaped leaves describe a leaf that is very long and narrow. Willows are your chief species with plant-shaped leaves. Cordate is when a a tree species has a leaf that is heart-shaped. So basswood, aspiens, and poplars are like that. Triangular is when it's similar to heart-shaped leaves, but more triangular in shape. Eastern cottonwood and a few birch trees have triangular leaves. Now I'll talk about leaf margins. Leaf margins are when you consider the edge of the leaf. They can be smooth, finely toothed, which are small symmetrical teeth present on the leaf edges. Coarsely toothed, which is large, jagged, coarse teeth, coarse edges. Doubly toothed, which means you have alternating large and small teeth. Rounded teeth, which is somewhat bumpy leaf margins. Hook teeth, which is kind of like a chainsaw and kind of bends back inwards. Beech and chestnut have hook teeth. Bristle tip lobes occurs in the red oaks, and rounded lobes occurs in the white oaks. So in some species, you'll have to distinguish the species by lobe divisions, or how deeply divided or shallowly divided the lobes are. So deeply divided lobes have much more space between individual lobes, as in sugar maple. Whereas the lobes of red maple are only shallowly divided. So there's not too much of a gap between each lobe on red maples. And that's how you distinguish silver maple from red maple. Bark is another extremely helpful feature to identify species of tree. So ridge bark is when elevated crests protrude from the bark. Furrows are the grooves, which are divided by ridges. Fissures are long, vertically aligned nail grooves in the bark. They appear as cracks, so any crack is probably a fissure. Plates are when large distinctive outgrowths on the bark form. They can be various sizes depending on species. Scales are small, thin ridges or plates. Exfoliating bark is when it's peeling, as in paper birch, probably the poster child for peeling or exfoliating bark, but also in other species such as shagbark hickory, white cedar, and ironwood. Crack bark is when bark cracks and kind of cracks as the newer bark underneath forms. Sycamore is probably one of the only examples of truly cracked bark that's not really like fizzard. Irregular quirky bark is when random outgrowths seemingly occur on the bark. Hackberry is the only species that has quirky bark regularly. And smooth, the absence of ridges, fissures, plates, or any other features. American beech is ubiquitous for this, but also this occurs in young quaking aspen and understory species, such as American hornbeam. So now we're going to dive into the actual trees of Ontario and the Great Lakes region. So I'm just going to show you what I have. So for each tree species, I'll have habitat, bark, foliage, cones, distribution, height. I'll have photos of leaves, the bark, and general tree form. Most of these will be my own, but some of them will be from local naturalists, Carter or Corinne, or government websites. Any photos that are not my own will be demarcated with a copyright symbol, and I'll also include a species distribution map for each of my species. So the first species we're going to dive into is white cedar. White cedar is a very distinctive tree, and the only tree you can really get white cedar confused with is red cedar. A distinguishing feature is the flattened sprays of the leaf. The white cedar foliage is more flattened. White cedar is also distinguished through its peeling bark and its general form. Juniper red cedar can be distinguished from white cedar through its leaf, which is more kind of pointed and blunt. It's not as flattened as the white cedar. Junipers will occur in alvars and old fields and things like that, whereas white cedar will occur in swamps and limestone cliffs. So they'll have very different habitat, the two types of cedar. For each key, I'm not going to describe very much on the key. You can look at it after the presentation, but I'm just probably going to go through the helpful identifying features that are most diagnostic for each tree species. So red pine is most easily distinguished by its reddish bark. White pine and jack pine do not have reddish bark, nor does any other species have like the same distinctive scaly and fizzard red pine bark. Red pine can also be distinguished from white pine due to its needles. Red pine will have 2 needles, whereas white pine will have 5 needles. And red pine also has by far the longest needles of any pine species in Ontario, around 15 centimeters, which is much longer than white pine. White pine is Ontario's provincial tree. It's very adaptable in habitat. Its bark is filled, dark, and brown. And the most easiest way to identify this from other pines is looking at the number of needles in its cluster. White pines will have 5 per bundle. Jack pine is also very distinguishable. And this is due to its short needle size. It only has 5 centimeters long for its needles. It has 2 per bundle, but also its growth form. Jack pine is usually more shrubby. It's not a tall tree like red pine or white pine. It's only shrubby in most situations. Fun fact is it is favored by the endangered Kirtland's warbler, which breeds in the northeast lower peninsula of Michigan, but also there are small populations in Ontario. White spruce. White spruce is dominant in the boreal forests of northern Canada, but in the Great Lakes, it is more of a scattered tree. The tree that you get white spruce confused with is black spruce, but white spruce is easily identifiable by its longer needles, which are approximately 2 centimeters long. Spruces have prickly needles that are very blunt. And yeah, so black spruce is easier to distinguish from white spruce due to its needles, which are 1 centimeter long. Also, its habitat is mainly bogs, which contrasts with white spruce, which habitat is mainly uplands and more well-drained sites. So if you see a spruce in the bog, it's most likely black spruce. Red spruce is another species that was intentionally introduced to Algoma by forestry officials, and it is kind of similar to white spruce, but it has distinctive reddish bark. It also grows in similar situations as hemlock, so moist, shady situations. It's common in the maritime provinces of Canada, such as Newfoundland and New Brunswick. Balsam fir. Balsam fir is best identified through its form and through its needles. So its form, it has a very spiral-like triangular form at the top when you look at its growth form. Its needles are flattened, and the only other tree with flattened needles is hemlock. But unlike hemlock, balsam fir has longer needles, up to 3 centimeters long, whereas hemlock rarely reaches 2 centimeters. Tamarack is a very distinctive species if you look at its features. It has many needles in clusters, and it is deciduous, and deciduous is probably its main factor. Once you get to know tamarack, it'll be very easily identifiable in the field because of its distinctive foliage and habit. Just going to check the time here, what, 34 minutes. Eastern hemlock is another species. It is identifiable by its needles, which are flattened and somewhat drooping, and also by its situation that it mainly grows in. So mainly cold, moist situations, you'll find hemlock, usually with shade-tolerant hardwoods such as sugar maple and beech. And talking about sugar maple itself appears on the next slide. So sugar maple is on Canada's flag. That's what it's based on. So if you look at the Canadian flag, that's a pretty easy way to distinguish the sugar maple. It's very just a typical looking maple leaf. But it also has lobes and scaly bug. Black maple is similar to sugar maple, but it has 3 lobes instead of 5, and black maple has flattened lobes. Sorry, it's not the lobes aren't flattened. I have a mind cloud right now. It's has drooping lobes. It's drooping, like the lobes droop. Red maple has very distinctive form as well. And unlike sugar maple, we go back to here, which has kind of like a more smoother edge. Red maple have more like teeth along its edges. Red maple will also have more flaky bark compared to sugar maple, which has more scaly bark. Red maple is most confused with silver maple, but as I've already explained in this presentation, they're most easily divided by their lobe divisions. Silver maple is very deeply divided, which means there's a lot of gaps that divide each lobe in silver maples, whereas in red maple, it's only shallowly divided, so not a lot of space. Fun fact about silver maples is that you'll see red flowers in the spring before the leaves come out, and they can actually be quite showy in flower. They look very beautiful. Box elder is your odd child of the maples, and it has best identified by its compound leaves, which have rounded teeth on them, actually, on the margins, unlike ashes. And also due to its growth form, which is typically crooked and it's very weedy. White ash. The white ash is our most grandiose of our ash species. It has a very typical, very distinctive bark pattern. It has distinctive ridges and furrows, making almost like a diamond shaped bark pattern. Ashes have compound leaves and they're opposite, which means a pair of leaves will attach at the same point of the twig, unlike alternate leaves. Green ash occurs in slightly more wetland situations. It's compared to white ash, and has a less regular diamond-shaped pattern, although it's diamond-shaped. Another factor especially in the autumn, to divide green ash from white ash is that white ash it has purple foliage in the autumn, whereas green ash will never turn purple and it'll only turn yellow. Blue ash is a southern species that is very easily identifiable in the field due to the twigs. The twigs are actually squared on blue ash. So wherever you find a square twig, walking in a Carolinian forest of Lake Erie, you'll find that is blue ash. There's no other species like that. Black ash is another easily identifiable species, and this is due to its leaves. So each leaflet is directly attached to the central stalk in black ash, whereas in white ash, I'll go back to where white ash is, you'll see that there's just a little bit of like kind of tissue that divides it, and the leaflet doesn't quite reach the central stalk, whereas in black ash, the leaf actually reaches the central stalk. Black ash is a endangered tree, which we're trying to get a lot of conservation attention towards due to the invasive emerald ash borer, which is decimating populations in southern Ontario. American chestnut is a southern species that was once called the redwood of the East due to its growth form over 50 meters in historical times, but now the tallest only around like 30 meters. However, American chestnut has fallen onto hard times, and that is due to the chestnut blight, which kills 99% of mature individuals and pretty much renders it as a shrub. But historically, it produced chestnuts, and there's active restoration work around the American chestnut. It is most identifiable by its leaf, which is very long. It's kind of like an oversized beech leaf. It's 25 centimeters long, and it has hooked teeth, and it's elliptical in shape. American beech is a highly distinctive species in the field due to its smooth bark, which is a giveaway. Only certain red maples have similar smooth bark, and even then, they are usually interrupted by like scales in some places of the bark. American beech has elliptical leaves with hooked teeth, as in chestnut. Just gonna check time here. We're at 41 minutes. So yellow birch, the next species I'll go into. Yellow birch is species with peeling bark, as in most birches, but its peeling bark appears more metallic rather than white, as in white birch, which I'll describe next. White birch has that very typical birch-like look. When everyone thinks of birch, they think of the white birch or the paper birch. And this has very white bark. But in yellow birch, we have metallic bark. You can also identify birches by the leaves. Yellow birch has elliptical leaves, whereas white birch has triangular leaves. Ironwood is another tree species that goes almost to the boreal forests and range. They're very cold hardy. Ironwood has elliptical, finely toothed leaves, but it's probably its main distinguishing factor is the bark, which is slightly flaky, and it divides into narrow vertical flakes. So now on to the oaks, which is the biggest section with 6 species. Red oak is the tree species you'll most likely find in Algoma. If you're in Algoma and you're walking, your white oak is by far the most likely species you'll find. The only other species that occurs this far north is bur oak. So red oak is distinguished by its leaf, which is bristle tipped, and it has multiple pinnate lobes, and also by its bark, which is shiny with silvery ridges and reddish furrows. Once you get to know this tree, it becomes a very distinctive tree due to its abundance and just repetition of identifying it. It also produces the biggest acorns of oaks. Black oak is another tree species in the south. You have the biggest factor to identify this species is you have square plates on black bark. And you also have, compared to red oak, you have low divisions on black oak, which are more deeply divided. White oak is another tree species, and this I'm now studying a group called the white oak group. So the previous 2 oak species produce acorns every 2 years. So they get pollinated 1 year and they take 2 years to finish. Whereas white oak only produces its acorns in 1 year. White oak is distinguished from the other oaks due to its lighter bark, which is gray and scaly. It also has distinctive round lobed pinnate leaves. Bur oak is another species in the white oak group. The main way to identify bur oak is through its bark and its leaves. Bur oak has much longer leaves than white oak, around 20 centimeters, and its bark is very scaly and very gnarled. Chinkapin oak is similar to white oak, but it does not have lobe divisions. It's not lobed. It's only elliptical with rounded teeth. And it has a very distinctive leaf shape. Most often it's found in various woodland savanna type forests. Swamp white oak is a species from swamp margins. Swamp white oak has similarly to chinkapin oak, except they are slightly more broad than chinkapin oak. Chinkapin oak tends to be more narrow. Tulip tree. So tulip tree is a species that, looking at bark, is most confused with white ash. They both have that diamond shaped bark. However, tulip tree tends to be straight. Its growth form is straight in almost every situation where I find it. It also has very distinctive a loaf-shaped leaf with 4 lobes, which is not found in any other species in Ontario. Cucumber magnolia is an extremely rare tree from the Lake Erie coast. It has a big tropical looking leaf, which is probably around 25 to 30 centimeters in length. And that tropical looking tree is how you distinguish it. It's very rare in the field. I just wanted to mention it because I really much appreciate cucumber magnolias. I like how they look. Basswoods have heart-shaped leaves, and they have gray with whitish streaks and fissured bark. Basswood bark will often appear to have white lining, which is a distinguishing factor once you become more experienced. But the best way as a beginner to identify basswood is through its massive leaves, which are heart-shaped. And at the biggest leaves, they can be up to like 25, 30 centimeters or so. Bitternut hickory is the first of 2 common hickories that occur in Ontario. It has more leaflets than shagbark hickory, each around 10 centimeters long, and obovate, which is obovate leaflets are definitely identifying characteristic of hickories. It also has fissured bark, which is fairly diagnostic. Shagbark hickory is another hickory species that occurs in Ontario. It is most easily distinguished by the bark, which is vertically peeling, and it flakes into plates, and it's a giveaway in the field once you become more experienced, if you're ever down south where I am. Sassafras is another tree species with a distinctive free-lobed leaf with smooth margins, and it has that midden-shaped leaf that I described in the previous section. It has brown bark that is deeply furrowed, almost like a white pine. Black gum is some of Ontario's oldest hardwood trees. I think the oldest are around 500 years old. They occur in swamps, and they have a distinctive elliptical leaf with smooth margins. American elm is found all over the Great Lakes. Unfortunately, American elm has fallen onto hard times similar to the chestnut. Dutch elm disease have wiped out a lot of American elms, but in Sault Ste. Marie, you'll see that a lot of American elms still exists, especially in city areas such as Bellevue Park. American elm is best distinguished by its weeping shape, which is somewhat resembles an umbrella, and its bark, which is gray and scaly. It has elliptical leaves, which are doubly toothed. Red elm is similar to white elm, except its bark tends to be more like kind of gnarled, and its inner bark is red as opposed to lightest color in American elm. But in the field, the most easiest way to distinguish slippery elm from American elm is the leaf size. The leaf is much larger than American elm and slippery elm. So slippery elm has around 15 centimeter leaves long, whereas American elm has around 10 centimeters for leaves. Hackberry. Hackberry is a common tree species in southern Ontario. It has distinctive corky bark, so it turns into corky ridges. That is the easiest way to identify hackberry, and mature specimens are easily identifiable all year round. Black walnut, which is a very common species where I am from. Black walnut is mainly found in bottomland forests, and it has very distinctive leaves, which are alternate, compound, and they have 15 to 23 leaflets, which are elliptical. The largest walnut leaves are towards the middle, unlike hickories, where the largest ones are towards the end. Butternut is similar to black walnut, except butternut prefers upland sites and it has less leaflets than black walnut. Butternut also has larger leaflets than black walnut, each around 5 to 10 centimeters long. Sycamore. So sycamore is very easily distinguishable. It has a massive leaf, sometimes up to 40 centimeters long in the biggest ones. I think the biggest ones are around 40 centimeters, but I might be exaggerating a little bit. They have 3 lobes, which are palmate, and they have hooked teeth. But the easiest way to identify sycamore in the field is by its bark. It is a distinctive white tree that occurs in riparian areas. If you see a white tree beside a river, that is sycamore. Cottonwood. Cottonwood is the first of the poplars I'll be going through. And finally, we're getting towards the tail end of our presentation, since I know that this, I did the poplars last out of all the tree species. So there's a few more after, but we're getting close to the tail end now. So cottonwoods are massive specimens that have been introduced all over. They're native to Southern Ontario, but they've definitely been introduced to Sault Ste. Marie. They tend to be massive and they have very distinctive heart-shaped leaves with rounded teeth. Leaves measure around 13 centimeters long, which is the largest for a native poplar. Big tooth aspian is one of our two aspians. Big tooth aspian has more hooked teeth on the leaf margin. Big tooth aspian is pretty similar to quaking aspian in other regards, although quaking aspian is more likely to form massive clones known as aspian groups. I think the biggest known organism in the world is a quaking aspian out in the Rocky Mountains called Pando. So here is quaking aspian. It's fairly similar to big tooth aspian. In North America, it's also called trembling aspian. And the leaf is almost identical, except it has smaller teeth. It's more teeth and smaller teeth on trembling aspian, whereas in big tooth you have those big, large teeth. Balsam poplar is easily distinguishable from the other poplars due to its darker leaf color and its ovate leaf shape. Balsam poplars will occur in riparian areas, in northern areas such as the St. Mary's River and the St. Joseph Channel. Black willow, in contrast, is a riparian tree of the southern regions around Lake Erie. Fun fact about black willow is that if you stick a twig into mud, that twig will actually form a new tree. So willows are very well known for doing that, just rooting in water from a twig. Black willow is easily identifiable by its lance-shaped leaf, which is 10 centimeters long. Lance-shaped means it's very long and very narrow. And finally, last two species. American mountain ash is the first of our two mountain ash species. Both our mountain ash species are basically identical, but American mountain ash is identified from showy mountain ash due to its tendency to flower 2 weeks later than showy mountain ash. Both are restricted to the northern Great Lakes, so you won't find them south of like northern Lower Peninsula and like the Muskoka region. Here's some pictures of showy mountain ash. Again, you see they're almost identical to the American mountain ash, but again, showy mountain ash flowers 2 weeks earlier than American mountain ash. American mountain ash flowers 2 weeks later than showy mountain ash. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer questions about tree species and tree identification.
Yeah, so if anyone has any questions, you can unmute yourself and ask, or you can put your question in the chat. Nobody has any questions? Oh, here's somebody. There's a question in the chat. We have, says we have red buds here. I'm not
Oh,
sure.
redbuds. Yeah. Redbuds are an understory tree species. They were once found on Pele Island, on Fish Point, which is like the southernmost point of Pele Island. And that was the only population in Canada. Unfortunately, that population is now extirpated, but redbuds are widely introduced to other areas.
Any other questions or comments from anybody?
I wonder if I can just do this.
Do you have a handout file of the presentation? Yeah, I can convert the presentation to a PDF file, and I can distribute that to everybody or anybody specifically that wants it. Oh, okay, so there's a few more comments here. I saw one type of chestnut. We have another with large leaves. What is it called?
We saw one type of chestnut. We have another of large leaves. What is it called? So yeah, I didn't go through the super rare one. So the other one is Ohio Buckeye. Ohio Buckeye is probably a very distinctive tree. It
Anything
has
else I want to say?
a palmately compound lead, which is very atypical leaf pattern. So yeah, they're also called horse chestnuts. So horse chestnuts, and Ohio Buckeye is part of the horse chestnut genus. Yeah, thanks so much. I appreciate your very kind comments.
There was a question about balsams. We used to have many balsam trees on Dawson Island, but no more. Any reason that you might be able to?
Dawson Island. Where is Dawson Island? I don't actually
So
know.
Dawson Island, so it's in the St. Joseph Channel here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Never heard of
My take is so I don't know if you're referring to balsam fir or balsam poplar. If it's balsam poplar, I would probably say it's due to ecological succession or disturbance. So you'll have you'll have more shade tolerant species taking over. Again, I don't know what Dawson Island looks like. If it's just a small rocky island, that's probably not the case. Maybe it's probably not due to succession, but probably due to ecological disturbance. Like maybe something like a storm took all the big ones out, and like now you only have saplings. If you're referring to balsam fir, you can maybe track it back to the spruce budworm, which is a regular pest of balsam fir. It is likely that if they were there once, they'll likely reestablish. But we'll have to wait and see on that.
Okay, there's another question here about sugar maples. Your map showed they weren't in our area north of the Sioux, but we are surrounded by them. Could they actually be a different maple?
Okay, so for that question, maybe you were looking at black maples, and black maples are not found north of like London actually. So they're a southern species. But sugar maples, I'll go back to where the sugar maples are. So yeah, I'll go back to, we'll look. So okay. I can't really see it right now. I'm just going to kind of go out of exit full screen. Okay. Yeah, actually, yeah, that yeah, that's probably wrong actually. I'll go replace that right now. A good resource you can go to for tree species range maps is you could just search up Little's maps. So Little was a botanist that mapped all the tree species. So you could go to sorry. Little's map. Okay. So here is the atlas that I've been using. It's pretty much the standard for tree species distributions right now, although there's several universities, I think, in Michigan that are trying
that
to
makes sense.
improve
Yeah.
tree species distributions.
He was definitely using that.
I'll just yeah. Sorry about that. So yeah, so this is the actual sugar maple distribution. As you could see, it is found north of Sault Ste. Marie, almost to Wawa. So around Wawa is where it kind of fades out and it switches back to a true boreal forest type. Any more questions? I'm gonna see what other questions I have. Go back to my presentation just to
I'm just looking here for you. One person said, "Great presentation. Do you travel to see new trees worldwide?"
maybe in the future.
And just a few comments. Thank you very much. Sarah said we used to collect the tips for pillows. Tips from what tree? That sounds
Trip.
interesting.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm just gonna open the chat. Let's see. I think there was another question too, Corinne.
The one that I missed
Um,
here.
we used to collect the tips for pillows. Okay. Just so
Balsam tips, she said.
balsam tips. Okay.
Okay.
That might be I actually don't know. Like I don't know too much about the uses. I'm a naturalist, so I mainly go out to identify tree species. Trees are kind of my specialty for identification, but I'm starting to learn my understory plants. I'm not a master like anything like you'll see some of these people and iNaturalist you'll see with many species. I'm getting there, but I'm not quite there yet. So this is actually my first presentation, so I'm very appreciative of you guys listening. Hopefully I'll improve the quality of the presentation in the future. Do you have any more questions? Awesome tips. Okay, so it looks like we're out of questions right now. So conservation. I'm very passionate about conservation in the St. Joseph Channel area. As you can see, I just kind of put up where the nature reserves are. The right two photos show Kensington Conservancy properties, and they've definitely been doing a great job along the St. Joseph Channel. Almost continuous almost a continuous row of nature reserves. So it's just great to have a conservancy that actually really cares about the future of this beautiful area. And St. Joseph's Island has always been an area of interest to me as well. Specifically the southern parts where most of the crown lands are located. I know the southwestern part of St. Joseph's Island has a lot of the one of the few areas in the north which have herbaceous marshes, as you could see from the brown tannish area near the south western part of St. Joseph's Island. The southeastern part is also important as St. Joseph's Island holds a good portion of Algoma's sugar maple beech strands. On the Canadian Shield, the sugar maple yellow birch, but in St. Joseph's Island, due to the more fertile soil, you'll see that a lot of the forest there are a sugar maple beech forest. There's a lot of beech on St. Joseph's Island. And the southeastern part of St. Joseph's Island in particular has some of the last undeveloped shorelines of St. Joseph's Island. A lot of the northeastern part and the northern part has been developed for cottages. So definitely a conservation priority in the future. And this is what I'm pretty passionate about, like just ecology, conservation, species. I love the land. So do you have any final thoughts? And this, I forgot to add one species actually. I forgot. I just realized that 30 minutes ago. I forgot to add one species. Just anyone who's still here, can you put in the chat what you think this species is? Yeah, you're right, Kaylee. It is a black cherry. Black cherry is a tall species found in rich sites. It's found in the north and in the south, but it's more common in the southern regions near Lake Erie, where I am presenting from London, actually. But as far north as Manitoulin and the upper peninsula of Michigan, you will see a black cherry trees. So it's a favorite of birds in the spring. And in the fall, when there's a lot of cherries, its scientific name is called Prunus serotonia, and serotonia means September, and that's when the fruit matures. So it's a very well-named scientific name. So yeah, thank you. If you have any last thoughts, you could share them right now. And that's it for my presentation. I'm very grateful to present to Kensington Conservancy, and hopefully I can work with Kensington Conservancy on its conservation volunteer initiatives in the future. So I'll pass it over to Kerwin.
Okay, well, we really appreciate you doing this presentation for us, Matthew. It was fantastic. There's so much information in there, and yeah, I loved it. And I'm not as familiar with a lot of the southern Ontario trees, so it's nice to see them kind of mixed in there as well. So maybe when I'm down there, I might be able to recognize a few.
Yeah, I feel like it's good to include the Southern Great Lakes because like it's kind of like the unifying aspect of like the Great Lakes. Like we're all in this one Great Lakes watershed, which is incredibly beautiful and incredibly biodiverse, worthy of um, definitely worthy of conservation attention. So
Absolutely. And yeah, we really appreciate your support of the Conservancy and look forward to
yeah,
maybe working with you on a few more uh, projects, and we'll see what
yeah,
else we can find for you to do for us.
yeah. Just reach out, and I'd be happy to get on board.
Absolutely. Well, you're
Man of the
obviously
land.
very passionate about it. So yeah, it's great. It's always great to have new people come aboard. So with yeah, so I just thanks again for everyone for joining. Um, I don't know 100% yet when our next webinar will be. It'll be either like the third or fourth week of February. I haven't determined the topic yet, but I think I might present a summary of all of our citizen science programs that we've been doing, and some of the results. So like our water monitoring program, our bat monitoring, our bluebird monitoring programs and things like that. So stay tuned. Check your emails and we'll send an announcement about that over the coming weeks. So if at that point, I guess I will call it a night, and I will send around that PDF to everybody as well of the presentation so that you have a copy. And again, thanks for joining and have a great evening.
Yeah. Have a good day, everyone.
Bye.